Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and welcome to part 8 of our galactic review/overview/war story series for the epic Traveller campaign, Secrets of the Ancients. In today's thrilling episode, we'll be covering Chapter 8, In the Emperor's Name. Coming in at 24 pages, the chapter is a significant change of pace from the last few chapters. Instead of taking place across an entire city or an entire planet with lots of combat and action, the entire adventure takes place inside of a single spaceship. And while violence is always a possibility when it comes to player characters, the whole adventure can be overcome simply through just roleplay and social skills. And it serves as a bit of a breather before we start ramping everything up for the big chase, which is Chapter 9, and then the big action-packed finale that is Chapter 10. It offers us a huge cast of characters, most new, but also a couple of familiar faces from earlier chapters. I also strongly encourage that game masters bring in any other NPCs from earlier chapters who may have survived and may want a little bit of revenge against the player characters. The whole thing took us 12 to 13 hours of playtime across 2 sessions, and it really shouldn't have taken us that long, but, What? You saying we could turn a 15-minute task into 3 hours? That's fair. The adventure is kind of weird in the way that the information is laid out, which can be a little bit annoying in a scenario with lots of conversation roleplay if a game master isn't able to find certain details very quickly and easily. And while some other details I feel just weren't explained as well as they should be, so that's what we're going to talk about today. My experience running the adventure, my criticisms, and my suggestions for any other game masters out there wishing to run this campaign. But first, let's reintroduce our heroes. They are Pixie, archaeologist and computer scientist who hates the pretentiousness and hierarchies of established academia. Lily, pilot, former belter who hates authority figures. Benjamin, retired naval captain and celebrated war hero desperate to restore his tarnished reputation. And Otto Otter Beckett, mechanic and former Imperial intelligence operative. They're joined by Dr. Aura Brevis, celebrated archaeologist, planetologist, and Peachy's mom. Hilda Beckett, a primitive hunter from a red zone world and Otter's new wife, and Amelia, an astromech droid with violent tendencies who really hates being left behind. Their ship is the Star Hunter, though her transponder lists some other names for her, a souped-up tech level 15 far trader with one hell of a custom paint job. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers, so any players in the audience, please stop now, but send your game master this way to learn about running this campaign for you. But if you keep going and you spoil yourself, the warden will take away your dessert privileges. Okay, Game Masters, when we last left our heroes, they battled their way through a robot zombie apocalypse as the ancient robot warship 7 tore through the Pocket Universe in search of Grandfather's mental archive backup. Making it back to the Star Hunter, the travelers blasted out of there, and as they passed through the damaged portal gate back into their own universe, they fell unconscious. Then, through the fog of unconsciousness, they heard the clomping of magnetic boots, a voice announced that they'd found survivors, Marines in battle dress ordering them to secure the prisoners, the sharp jab of a needle, and then blackness. Now, one detail that's kind of buried in the text of this chapter, and I'd really have appreciated a big highlighted heads up for this, is while the travelers entered the Pocket Universe from Hex 2206, their ship was found floating 4 parsecs away in the Bougine system. Now, reason being, I assume, is Grandfather wanted them to be found and rescued, and not just floating off in an empty parsec of space and possibly an old Saturn I rocket with no fuel. Now, I missed this detail when I was running it, and I came up with an excuse how the traveler's ship was found in this empty parsec of space. So heads up for any game masters out there, they emerged back into this universe at Bougine. Now, Chapter 8 takes place in the Pixie system. It's a low-population, rockball vacuum world with just a few belt miners, but it's also home to a very large naval base for the 213th Fleet. Now, because of this military base, any travelers are discouraged from going to Pixie. The system also has a few secrets. First, and I got this one off the Traveller Wiki and incorporated it, is there are some ancient sites on Pixie that most people don't know about outside of academics, locals, and the military who protects these sites. And second, a secret Imperial Prison is in orbit above the system's gas giant. Formerly a 1,200-ton colonial cruiser named the Gash, the warship was plagued with mechanical problems and eventually decommissioned, stripped of its drives and weapons, and repurposed as a prison hulk commonly nicknamed as the Gash. The Gash is home to political prisoners, violent criminals, and those suspected of higher crimes. That's where they vanish to. They and the prison itself don't officially exist. Now, Benjamin, who was born in Pixie and served as a captain in the 213th, is well aware of all of this, as well as the Naval Prize Yard where the Star Hunter is most likely being stored. So I summed everything up in a handout that I gave to Benjamin's player that he could then share with the rest of the group. Once again, I strongly recommend that you have your players all choose a planet in the Regina sector that they grew up in and that they're familiar with. That way you can have it when you're playing this campaign, they can visit whichever world they're with. It worked spectacularly for us because at this point we have now visited every single one of the player characters' home systems. So before running this adventure, I needed to commit to a decision. In Chapter 6, the travelers were given a test by Grandfather, in which whatever character he found to be the most worthy and like-minded was chosen to become his archive with a copy of his consciousness implanted, sort of like what Spock did to McCoy in Star Trek II. Now, I knew it was either going to be Lily or Benjamin, but I didn't have to commit to it just yet. However, Chapter 8 is where Grandfather's implanted mind becomes known, and I couldn't put this off any longer, so I decided that Benjamin was going to be Grandfather's host. Anyway, the adventure opens up as the travelers awaken aboard a shuttle. They're all in restraints and all their weapons and equipment are gone. A medical cuff around Benjamin's arm injects drugs into him to keep him from using the muscles that extend his extremely enhanced dew claws. Outside the viewport, they see the swirling clouds of Pixie's gas giant and the prison hulk looming closer. Docking with the Gash, the travelers are led down to come face to face with the warden and Orissa, the Imperial agent from Chapter 2 who had posed as Lynn-Backett's wife.
Auntie, it's you!
Orissa, who we learn in this chapter has the surname Thalber, informs the travelers that they are being detained at the pleasure of the Emperor until further notice. They'll be questioned about Lynn-Backett and their activities since his death. If they cooperate, they may be pardoned and released.
Yeah, like we're gonna trust you. Lady, I have seen things you people wouldn't believe.
That check. That check. That ching. That a check.
Hey, Benji?
That check.
You okay there, buddy?
That a check. That a check.
It was at this moment when Benjamin started looking around in confusion and muttering to himself in drawing as if surprised by his surroundings. Now I handed his player handout 5, which again, it annoys me to no end that these handouts are all in a separate handout PDF and not included inside the campaign book itself. Now over the course of this adventure, we have 3 scenes where Grandfather's mind takes control of his host's body, as there's trying to understand where it is he's found himself. Now each time includes a handout that you give to the player. And me being me, I made a few minor changes to them, and as always, you can download them at the link in the video description below. Now, in the first one, I spelled out that the shrinking pocket universe was Grandfather's trap, and in 3 months, the collapsing universe is going to kill 7. The second vision, a little bit later in this adventure, possibly the second day, states how 7 should have a hidden archive backup of his own that will activate the instant 7 dies inside the pocket universe, and if that happens, 7 will reign terror over the galaxy. The third and final vision is of Grandfather using that super weapon that he fired because it wasn't intended to destroy 7, but to hack it. There, Grandfather located 7's archive. He knows that it's a garden world with a high level of neon. There's a gas giant with 3 moons. Vargers enslave a race of sea slugs. It's located in the Uth subsector and is hidden beneath the planet's crust. So by the third vision, the travelers should know that they have about 3 months to get out of this prison, get up to the Uth subsector, locate a garden world that's populated with these sea slugs, find 7's hidden base that's hidden beneath the crust of the planet, and destroy it. So let's talk about this prison. The adventure gives us a deck plan. It's 3 levels high. Staff and ops are up on A deck. Prisoner quarters, gym, and shuttle docks are down on B deck. And the shuttle is only there on the Gash long enough for pickups and deliveries and follows no discernible schedule that any of the prisoners can figure out. Deck C is mostly the empty drive rooms that are now converted to storage. The ship's power plants are located here, but they supply barely barely enough power to support gravity and life support aboard the prison hulk. I even said how these were not the original Tech Level 15 power plants, but some old reactors that had basically been taken out of other ships and just hooked up here because they're still working, but they needed those Tech Level 15 ones for any active ships out there. So everything in the ship has just been kind of coddled together and held together with duct tape. Now, the prison itself is pretty light on guards and security. There's no way off of it. There's no drives, no weapons, and you're millions of kilometers from anything at all. We have several levels of NPCs here. First is the prison staff. We have 6 senior staff and 14 guards. The MS 20 in total. Now we have profiles for some of them. Generally speaking, anyone stationed on the prison is bottom of the barrel military. They're either screwed up, they're underperformers, they're serving their last term before retirement, or they're hotheads who were sent here to cool off and learn a little bit of humility at this crap posting that no one else wants. Also, one of them is a secret Jodani sleeper agent, but we'll get to that a little bit later. The next faction of NPCs are the prisoners. The adventure gives us 8. One is a tyrant dictator who was overthrown and sent to this prison to serve out the rest of his life. Another is a naval captain. He'd gone pirate and was eventually captured by the Imperium, but it's only a matter of time before he's tried and executed for his many crimes, so this guy is desperate to escape. Thouk, I'm sure, is a reporter, and while she was doing a piece on military intelligence gathering, her speculations of what technology was being developed were so accurate that the Imperium assumed that she'd accessed some top-secret information, so she's currently under arrest until she confesses who her source was that leaked this classified information to her. Evan Hunt Ushur, who I'm horribly mispronouncing his name probably, is a very handsome and exceptionally personable noble. He's also a ruthless serial killer known as the Laughing Man. He's not kept in the general population and spends most of his time in solitary confinement. Whenever outside his cell, he's always escorted and wearing a shock collar. He claims to be innocent, and it's all just a simple misunderstanding. Take, Yalen, and Osvok are 3 interchangeable goons. They're small-time smugglers and drug traffickers who were just recently captured and are temporarily here for a few weeks as, various warrants go throughout the mailboat network before they get shipped off and tried wherever it is that wants them. They're more of a comedic relief and possibly muscle for the travelers might use or might be used against them. Finally, Gaius Labre, the sniper who was arrested in Chapter 1. Over the last few months, as the travelers have been traipsing through 2 universes on the adventure of a lifetime, Gaius has been rotting in here. He knows nothing about the ancients or any of these conspiracies. He was just a hired gun sent to kill an old lady, and with the death of Gant Holsis, has pretty much been forgotten with no hope of release. So he's convinced himself that all of this is the fault of the travelers. Maybe they're Inigavar terrorists, or maybe there's Odani agents. Whatever it is, he wants revenge on the travelers for ruining his life.
Well, the joke's on him, because one detail that Seth did not mention was shortly after we left Alel, we used Uncle Vlin's medbay to perform some cosmetic surgery on ourselves. Yeah, my mom is still giving me grief because I removed my father's nose, so that Gaius dude is not going to recognize us. Not unless some jerk goes and tells him who we are.
I also added one more prisoner to this mix, Baven Shar, the ruthless criminal from Chapter 3. Now, because the travelers, they didn't kill him when they met him, and they sent the surviving archaeology team back to Regina with him as a prisoner, I decided that the Imperium would have sent him here. After all, he is a dealer in black market ancients technology and was associated with the fugitive travelers. So Baven Shar is also looking to escape and hopefully get even with the player characters, which he does recognize who they are and will gladly share that information. The adventure specifies who shares rooms and who has rooms alone, but it doesn't assign specific rooms to anyone. So for my game, I assigned the rooms out like this, with all the player characters sharing this room.
Wait a second, where's Amelia? She wasn't on the shuttle when we came to.
When asked about Amelia, Orissa said that when they found the travelers unconscious, this hostile astromech droid attacked the Marines. Now, their sensors detected that this droid was carrying a pocket nuke, which is just super illegal just about everywhere, and the Imperial Marines ended up having to destroy this droid in order to get the nuke away from it.
Son of a bitch! Okay, which of you jerks gave her a pocket nuke? Oughta, look at me.
The final group of NPCs are the Imperial authorities who are sent to interrogate the travelers. The first is Arissa, who is desperate to know what happened to her mentor Gandholsis. The next is Malakot Tarvel. He doesn't have a portrait in the 2nd edition campaign book, but he does have one in the 1st edition book, so we'll go ahead and use that. He represents the Ministry of Technology, specifically Ancients Technology. He's a wealthy, arrogant twit from a noble family and is direct communication with the Emperor himself. His pet theories, such as the Ancients Empire was a single race that collapsed over the course of millennia, are all widely accepted but terribly wrong, and he'll refuse to accept anything else. Both Pixie and Dr. Brevis know of him, and he knows about Dr. Brevis, but just discounts her as being a backwater fringe archaeologist. Tarvel is mostly intended to be an annoying and comical antagonist to the travelers, clearly desperate to validate his own theories and discount the travelers no matter what evidence they supply that might contradict his theories, just twisting it all up to make himself look good. Finally is Galen. Again, we'll use this picture from the 1st edition book. Galen doesn't officially exist. He holds no title or military rank or any official records at all. But what he has is an official Imperial warrant granting him the ability to act in the Emperor's name and use the Emperor's authority, making him the senior person in the system, possibly the entire sector. If you read Mark Miller's brilliant novel, Agent of the Imperium, Galen's authority is a lot like the protagonist in that. Galen is also a powerful scion, trained at the secret Imperial Psionic Institutes. Now, this chapter is intended to take several days or even weeks. Life in prison is slow, and we have a lot of time to roleplay and build alliances and formulate our various escape plans. Now, each day has a set routine, and trusted prisoners might be permitted to perform light duties around the ship, like collecting supplies, up from A deck, or performing minor maintenance around the ship. Now, while the adventure says what the schedule looks like, it's kind of all spread out in a wall of text, so I summed all this up as a clear schedule that I gave to my players. Every 66 hours we're going to have an event. Now, this might be a supply shuttle arriving, a prison brawl, or unique event. Now, the most common one we'll have is brownouts. Due to the prison hulk's crappy electrical system, we might have the lights go out, gravity shut off, the magnetic doors might all unlock. These are all great opportunities for interesting things to happen.
Okay, enough with the setup. Can we get on with the adventure now?
Okay, so after their arrival on the Gash, the player characters had that first day to really get the feel for the place and just rest themselves up. Now, while there were obvious cameras, a search of the room discovered several hidden microphones and cameras in there. And the only good blind spot that they figured out where they could talk without being overheard or watched was at the very edge of one of the bunks. I had a laugh that maybe they might have to cuddle on a bunk and whisper secrets to each other. From their cell door, they could talk with 3 other inmates who they shared the passage with and learn, where they were and what's going on and what to expect here. And then take Yellen and Osvok across the common room, who were mostly crowded around their door and yelling and calling at Hilda, and not much for regular conversation. Now, I decided that unless the player characters got these 3 brutes on their side quickly, they'd be recruited by Gaius Labre or Baven Shar to be used against them. However, once the first gym time rolled around, Lily challenged the biggest, Osvok, to a wrestling match on the mats, and she absolutely kicked his ass, and then again on the rematch, asserting her dominance and turning these 3 guys into her flunkies.
Okay, first day in prison and I got myself a gang of goons. What did you do?
Me and Hilda got some great time in on the treadmills, and we got to watch you kick those guys' asses. Pixie, meanwhile, was called up to A deck to resolve some minor error in his records, allowing him to get to meet Pode and Samson, and also identifying the locked storeroom where all of their confiscated gear was being held. The next day is when we began the interrogations. Now, these take place down on C deck and occur over several rounds over several days. The first round is all the travelers at once, being interrogated by Arissa and Dr. Haunt Tarvel. There are cameras and obvious lie detector sensors all set up all around them, so the travelers know that they are being under lie detectors as they speak. Now, this interrogation is mostly there just to review the events of the campaign itself, what all has happened to the player characters. And this helps not only remind the characters, but the players of what all has happened here, because, a lot of time has probably passed both in and out of the game. Arissa is concerned with Flynn Backett, Gandholsis, and the relations between the Ancients and humanity. Traveller is mostly interested in the ancients and discounting anything that contradicts his own theories or simply reinterpreting them to fit and kind of mansplain how they didn't actually see or experience what they thought they did. Such as with the ancient ship in Chapter 4, nothing that the ship said could be taken as fact because by its own admission, a virus had corrupted its memory, so therefore anything it said couldn't be taken as fact. Or the vision they experienced in the distant past, that was just a hallucination and in no way factual. Now this interrogation is where I experienced my first problems. The adventure assumes that the travelers, wanting to clear their names and get out of here and get on with the adventure, maybe go off and save the universe, that they're going to share their story with their interrogators, and this array of lie detectors and everything might dissuade them from concealing the truth, or at least make it very obvious that any attempts to lie are going to require some serious rolls. But when we played it, that wasn't the case. First, Pixie, as part of his character's backstory, hates established academia, especially people like Traveller. It's almost like Traveller was made specifically for Pixie, because this is exactly what the player said he hated when he made the character. So he didn't want to tell these guys anything. So his approach was pretty much, I want you to take an entire fleet of warships, and I want you to fly several weeks to an empty parsec of space and just look at it. And then I want you to fly a couple weeks back here and tell me what you've seen. And then I'll tell you what I know. But I refuse to tell you guys a single thing until you do that. Lily, as we've discussed before, hates authority figures in government, so she didn't want to share anything with these guys. Now, she tried her best to tell the story of what happened, but excluding all the stuff dealing with the ancients or anything illegal or anything she just didn't want to tell them. Now, I explained that deception through omission was still deception, and this ended up leading to a lot of back and forth and frustration conversation, but finally she did agree to roll because I was going to make her roll because she was trying to deceive through omission, and she ended up getting a natural 12 boxcars on this. And so with all of her bonuses and everything, that came to a 15, meaning that the interrogators couldn't detect when she was deceiving them, though she knew that they did know that she was deceiving them because she was pretending that she didn't know about a lot of stuff that they knew that she had done.
Damn right, I have no idea who this scant-holes this guy was, and that recorded broadcast of me talking crap to him, I don't remember it.
Neither of them surprised me with this. Now, Benjamin, being a high-ranking naval officer, a war hero, and presumably wanting to clear his name, I was sure that he was going to talk and share information. I mean, he's probably done hundreds of debriefings over the course of his career, but that was not the case. Over the years of my friendship with him, Benjamin's player has often referenced that scene in Firefly where Jane doesn't speak at all during an interrogation and just stares the guy down, saying that's one of the most badass things. So I suppose that given the chance, the player just took that opportunity to do it. Meanwhile, Otter's player was terrified he was going to upset the rest of the players, so he just didn't want to talk.
I don't know what to do, and I'm afraid to commit to anything.
It was like pulling teeth because the player kept saying how he didn't want to make any of the other players mad, and the other players were telling him, don't worry about it, just simply do what his character would do, to which the player simply froze up and continued apologizing and trying to follow the rest of the table's lead of not sharing anything at all, despite them telling him not to do that or worry about what it is their characters were doing. Now, this interrogation scene was possibly one of the most painful role-playing experiences I've had in years, not because of their unwillingness to trust the NPCs with the truth, but their unwillingness to really do anything at all out of fear they might have to make a deception roll and then fail that roll. Then Lily eventually did make a deception roll and just knocked it out of the park. So, of course, that was after we had to have a lengthy debate about, deception through omission being a thing. No, because, she didn't want to roll at all. But Pixie and Benjamin wouldn't even share enough information to warrant a roll. They shared nothing, either true or false. And then Otter's player was so worried of upsetting the other players that he refused to even get in the game and just role play. He just kept telling the other players, out of character around the table, how he just didn't know what to do here. Now, trusting the NPCs and talking to them honestly about what happened, that is the easiest way to get out of this prison and get on with the rest of the campaign. But since the player characters refused that option, I figured we just move forward with plan B of breaking out of the prison, which is totally possible, but a whole lot harder. So as I began wrapping up the scene so we could get on with them being prisoners and trying to break out of here,
Okay, I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. It all started, we were on a Fate. We were going to be picking up a ship for refit. I just bought this really great watch that's got this metal detector and a holographic projector in it. And then I got a message that my Uncle Flynn, he had died on Regina. So we go to Regina to pick up his body.
And Otter spilled his guts. He told them everything. He held nothing back. It was this giant stream of consciousness story, and he wouldn't stop and answer questions until all of it was out. Thank God. And then once the cat was out of the bag, the other players started getting involved, sharing their adventures, bragging about what they did, and downplaying or trying to shut Otter up from admitting to some of the super illegal stuff that they might have performed. Now, once this first interrogation was done, the player characters returned to their cells and they continued working on their plans of escape. Otter tried and failed to make toilet wine out of some strawberry jelly packets. Lily started learning the ins and outs of the prison schedule and how Pode was a hookup for contraband. Also, Game Masters, don't forget to have the rest of the prison staff come and interact with Level 2, either joining them during gym time or just walking around doing various tasks around the ship or just simply being available for the player characters to meet them. It does no good if those NPCs spend all of their time up on A deck, like they're locked away from the players and the player characters, so go ahead and make sure that you have time for the rest of the NPCs up on A deck just to come down to B deck and do different things and allow the player characters to meet them. Gaius and Bave and Shar tried to start some crap with the player characters, but Lily sent her goon squad after them, landing the 2 enemies in the infirmary and 2 of Lily's minions in solitary confinement for a couple days. Pixie aimed most of his attention at Thoakam Shore. He didn't buy her whole claim how she was just an innocent reporter.
Yeah, her story seems fishy to me. I mean, they just don't go throwing innocent people into secret government prisons under the Emperor's pleasure. We're innocent people that have been sent to a secret prison under the Emperor's pleasure. That's as irrelevant as it is true. No, she is definitely hiding something. Maybe she's a Jodani spy.
Peach even managed to use his psionics on her, which should have signaled that she wasn't a psionic and probably not a Zodani, but he still wasn't convinced after that. Now, during a brownout, Otter managed to talk the guards into letting him help fix the power plants, and he was very successful at it, and he decided to use that as his angle to get more freedoms and the ability to maybe move around the ship and align himself with a different staff here. So, while waiting for the next power failure to happen, he spent the rest of his time just hanging out in his room with Hilda, watching whatever movies that the prison had on their internal Netflix streaming and not really interacting with anyone else around the ship, just waiting for a power outage, pretty much wanting the game to come to him and not wanting to come to the game. Now, Benjamin had 2 more visions. They learned that the clock was ticking and that they needed to stop 7, and he also developed psionics. After a few days, Galen arrived on the ship. He spent a few minutes standing outside the traveler's cell, watching them and not saying anything, to which Peachy correctly identified that they were being psionically probed. During another power failure, Peachy went to go check on Thoakam Shore, make sure that she was safe, but also to get an opportunity while they were one-on-one to maybe get a confession out of her.
We are probably never going to get out of here, and if you found out that you only had a few months left to live, do you think you might consider doing something that you normally wouldn't consider doing? Sharing something with somebody you can trust, somebody that understands how you feel.
Is this a sex thing? This feels like a sex thing to me.
Yeah, it really sounds like you're trying to hook up with her.
What? No, it's not a sex thing. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, it totally sounds like a sex thing.
Okay, well, roll persuasion, and if you fail by 2 or more, she's going to think that you're propositioning her.
Ha! Boxcars! She knows exactly what I mean.
Damn, leave it to Peachy to cockblock himself.
And in prison, no less.
I'm sure promised that she really was just a journalist whose speculation ended up getting correct and that she wasn't a spy at all, Zodani or otherwise.
Man, I gave her the best that I could possibly do and she still didn't crack. She is clearly a top-level Zodani agent.
The interview was cut short as Lily recruited Peachy to help her during this brownout sneak up to A deck and break into the storeroom where all their stuff was hidden. She managed to get inside, but then a guard walked past, and Peachy was spotted and thrown in solitary confinement. Meanwhile, Lily found all but one of the Ancients' encounter suits, as well as some handheld weapons. Now, I also had it where one of the Ancients' encounter suits and some of the other Ancients' technology, Haunt Tarvel had that in his room because he was studying it. So that way, if the player characters do make it up to A deck, they don't just have to break into the supply closet. If they managed to break into his room, they could find some of their Ancients' technology. Anyways, Lily then snuck all this stuff down to B deck and stashed it behind a wall panel down in a lesser used passage where she could get to it at some later date. The only other big prison drama that happened during this time is when the second round of interrogations was scheduled but then delayed because Galen identified comms clerk Samson as a Zodani sleeper agent named Zinj. Her entire personality was implanted since she was 5 years old, hiding the real personality beneath. So after hours of her own interrogations, she was thrown in a cell and outfitted with a cuff, kind of like Benjamin's, that kept her injected with psionic suppressing drugs. Now, at the time, I hadn't noticed that Zinj doesn't even have psionics. She was a sleeper agent that wasn't even psionic, but I missed that, so I went ahead and said she was psionic, and they gave her this cuff to suppress those. Lily went and spoke to her, and Zinj offered to help them break out and take them back to the Zodani consulate, where their experience with the ancients would make them heroes. I also added that Zinj had prepared for the possibility of her being captured, and she had stashed a vac suit and equipment down on level C. She had also installed some programs in the ship's computer that would disable their comms, their sensors, and their security systems, so she just needed help getting down to level C in order to retrieve this stuff, and then she could start enacting a plan in order to get her off of it, and that way the travelers could kind of add themselves to that, and hopefully they could all escape together.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good offer. I'll think about it. Yeah, right. Like I'm gonna join the freaking Zodani.
The second round of interrogations is one-on-ones. Instead of having the player characters only being interviewed by one interrogator like the adventure suggests, I had each character have one-on-one meetings with 2 of the interrogators, meaning that these interrogations were spread out across several days. I also asked each player to secretly tell me which character that their character believed would be the most likely to betray the rest of the party, because this determines who Galen is going to focus his attention on. Now, I didn't tell my players this or why I was doing it as a result of this until this adventure was well and truly over, but I can go ahead and tell you. Lily said Benjamin because he was a goody two-shoes. He always played by the rules and loved the Imperium. Peachy voted for Otter because Otter had worked for Imperial Intelligence previously. Otter, meanwhile, believed Peachy would be the most likely, and Benjamin also voted for Peachy as the most likely to betray the party. With the NPCs, Hilda voted for Peachy. Dr. Brevas, who once spent time in an underground resistance on a planet, she knows a rat when she sees one, and likely would have said Peachy, but she chose Benjamin because Benjamin had already said that Grandfather's mind was inside him, making him therefore compromised and doesn't require her saying that her son would be a rat.
Hell yeah! Nobody picked me because they know I am trustworthy.
After the adventure was done and I shared all this information with my players, Peachy's player was a little hurt that his character was voted the most likely to betray the party.
Well, there was that one time on Regina when we went to a friend's house and she got shot.
Holy crap! I'm gonna check the body and make sure she's still alive.
You do that. I'm gonna go hide in another room.
Then there was that one time that we got locked in that one room.
We gotta kill Benjamin if we want to get out of here, guys.
Whoa! Why don't we try plan A first?
And then just a few minutes after that happened,
It's coming to kill you! And who could forget that time in the distant past when we were the precursors working for Grandfather?
Guys, I don't want to kill you, but these droids need to escape. This is a check and balance against Grandfather.
Now with the second round of interrogations, there's a couple ways that the travelers might be able to negotiate their freedom out of here. Convincing Arissa requires that the travelers disclose certain items. Now this should be more roleplay and conversation and not as much dice rolling. If the travelers can successfully present the majority of the points on her checklist, she will agree to help them escape. With Hot Tavel, I gave him one thing to offer because the adventure doesn't give him anything at all to offer outside of just kind of being an antagonist and a little bit comical. But being the Emperor's authority on the Ancients, all of the Ancients' technology that the travelers picked up is under his control. So if the travelers appease him, essentially stroke his ego and make him feel special, he'll agree to let them have their Ancients' technology back if they are legally released, and that way they can go off and fight 7 with it. Unfortunately, between Peachy and Dr. Brevas' interviews with him, that pretty much ensured that Tarvel would do nothing to help him because both of them were pretty dang insulting. Galen's interviews were a bit different. Between mind probes and his expertise in body language, he fully believes the traveler's story. His priority is the threat that the Ancients pose to the Imperium. And while 7 is definitely a horrible threat, Galen doesn't find aligning with Grandfather to be any better of an option. He's also figured out that Benjamin is possessed by a supremely powerful and dangerous psionic intelligence. But Galen can be convinced to fully pardon the travelers, give him their shit back, and even give him his imperial warrant and all the powers that bestows, but only under one condition. Which brings us to Pixie. So when Pixie came down for his one-on-one interview with Galen, I added this high-tech white panel structure that Galen had erected, essentially a psionic shield so no psion could listen into whatever they were saying. Galen laid out his thoughts how the ancients were a direct threat to humanity and all the other races. When Pixie explained how they needed to get out of here and get to the Uth subsector to find and destroy Seven's archive, Galen agreed to it, but only under the condition that Pixie kills Grandfather the moment that Seven is destroyed. Pixie refused because he wouldn't agree to kill Benjamin. Galen tried persuading him, explaining how billions, even trillions of lives could be saved through this one act. But again, Pixie refused to kill Benjamin. Galen said how Grandfather's mind was far more than Benjamin's brain could even contain, and might even kill Benjamin, and so Grandfather would likely be putting himself in a new body as fast as possible, and maybe once he gets to Seven's place there could be a cloning facility or some other means that Grandfather could put his mind into it, meaning that it might not require that they kill Benjamin if Grandfather has already moved his consciousness to a new host.
Yeah, and it's just as likely that Grandfather would still be inside of Benjamin at that time, and I refuse to kill my freaking friend. Do you understand that? I am not gonna be the Imperium's hitman. Stupid jerk. Fuck you.
Before releasing Pixie back to solitary confinement, Galen used his psionics to wipe the memory of the conversation from Pixie's mind. That way Grandfather wouldn't be able to read the thoughts and the memories of this conversation, but also that way Pixie wouldn't be able to spill the beans and tell everybody what it was that they had talked about. Now, this was something that I added and that I had planned to do even in the event that Pixie had agreed to kill Grandfather, because that way it would kind of be suppressed in his mind, and then that memory would reactivate once certain parameters have been met and Pixie would know what his secret role was. So I went ahead and added that he wasn't going to remember what it was that they talked about, because Pixie didn't agree to it, but he didn't want to rat him out. But I also had it where this was going to awaken once Seven was dead, that Pixie would remember that this was an offer. That way, Galen thought that maybe if that opportunity arose, Pixie would agree to kill Grandfather, even if he was inside Benjamin or not. Now, I also had it where, because Pixie was psionic, that every couple weeks there was a chance, if he made a high psi roll, that these memories would start coming back to him, like little bits and pieces of it during dreams, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, during all this same time, and we're rotating scenes, cutting back and forth at the table as we're doing our one-on-ones, Lily was meeting with Arissa, and we just reached the point in the conversation with her that Arissa was convinced, but I hadn't said anything about it, because we then flipped to Pixie and Galen, which, that conversation didn't go well, so then we flipped back to Lily and Arissa, as Arissa said that she would agree to help them. However, unless Galen also agrees to pardon the Travelers, Arissa can't legally release the Travelers, which we just established that Galen was not going to pardon them at all. His next plan was to actually go ahead and kill Benjamin. So Arissa said that she would probably end up in prison herself for doing this, but she was going to help break the Travelers out. However, because the Travelers would still be fugitives, because they would have just escaped this prison, the best she could do would be smuggling them back onto their ship. And because both the Star Hunter and the Beck's Halo were in the naval prize yard above Pixie, she asked her which ship they wanted to steal. Lily told her that they wanted the Star Hunter, and Arissa said it'd take her 2 days and just to hold tight. 2 days later, a supply shuttle arrived at the prison. Arissa snuck the Travelers into an empty shipping container that was then loaded up and flown down to the naval prize yard above Pixie. Now, this whole journey took a couple days that they were locked inside of this container, but then after a while, it was then loaded up onto the Star Hunter, which the Travelers then emerged to find that their ship had been torn apart from when the Imperial Marines had tossed everything during their initial search. Now, because the adventure doesn't know if the Travelers will even have Star Hunter at this point in the campaign, or if they were released or broken out by Galen or Arissa, they might be offered a scout ship if they lack a ship of their own. And while this isn't mentioned in Chapter 8, at the very beginning of Chapter 9 is when they mention this, that they're also given Tech Level 12 vac suits and Gauss pistols for each of them, as well as 500,000 credits to help them out on their mission. So I had those sitting inside the container that Arissa had put them into, as well as an encrypted radio, that way they could message her once the mission was complete. I don't know why the adventure doesn't go ahead and mention all of this stuff in Chapter 8, but they mention it in Chapter 9, so Game Masters be aware. Anyway, as the Travelers were assessing their ship, Amelia emerged from another room. She'd clearly really been heavily damaged by marine plasma rifles, but the self-repair upgrade that Lily had paid a small fortune to have installed on her had at least gotten the robot working again. When Lily rushed forward to hug the droid that she had believed was dead, Amelia introduced herself in that generic Amazon Alexa voice that it was an astromech droid and asked if they needed any assistance.
Oh my god, all of a damage reset of factory settings. She really is dead.
It was then that Amelia yelled, "Surprise!" and tried tasing Lily for being gone and demanded to know where Lily had been.
Oh wow, I ain't even mad. I'm just happy you're alive.
Because both the Star Hunter and Beck's Halo were in this naval prize yard, I honestly wondered if the Travelers might try stealing both of their ships back. However, they did take Star Hunter's launch craft over to the Halo, dodging naval patrols as they went, and then they looted it. Pixie got Killjag back with its steward and maintenance programs, had kept the ship in great shape, and had also been feeding Squirt, who was real happy to see Pixie again. They also took the single ton of stolen pharmaceuticals that Lily had hidden in the secret compartment that the Imperium search hadn't found.
I'm just happy we got all our old guns back that we'd left at Alel.
Pixie also reclaimed his 14 advanced probe drones and 4 tons of repair drones. I was surprised that they didn't use these repair drones to remove the Halo's dual plasma guns and particle beam weapons to then install those on the Star Hunter, but they decided against doing that. And then loaded up with all their loot, they headed back to Star Hunter and readied the ship for escaping Pixie, thus ending Chapter 8. Overall, despite my frustrations with the initial interrogation scene, we had a lot of fun with this adventure. I like that this one is completely set aboard one ship and really focuses on the roleplay. And I barely scratched the surface with all the different things that might play out here, all the different interactions that we did have that played out. The most difficult part with this adventure is keeping up with this huge cast. The adventure gives us 17 named NPCs to juggle and several more unnamed guards and prison staff who might, emerge during play. I also added one more by bringing back Babe and Shar, so juggling all the NPCs and providing opportunities to interact with them, that can be a bit difficult for game masters to manage. Again, I really do recommend that game masters have the staff come down from A deck to B deck to perform, various tasks or just get some time in at the gym themselves and just allow the possibility for the player characters to talk and interact with them. Now for my game, I also had that the empty docking space was used for as a recreational space when there was no ship there, to walk around or maybe have some basketball games in. The other thing to really consider with this one is the timing. Life in prison is slow, and the player characters are under constant watch from cameras and microphones, meaning that the opportunities for them to enact plans or conspire with other inmates is pretty limited to just a few brief windows a day. So show that passage of time to them, because if the players try to rush it and they spring themselves too quickly, the guards are going to be onto them because the players didn't really take their time the way they needed to. This makes that revelation of how they've only got 3 months or so to get back to Seven's base is a lot more urgent because time inside the prison moves so slowly. But whether they stage a breakout or they talk to their captors into releasing them, the whole process of this entire chapter should hopefully take a couple weeks. Okay, well that is it for this episode. Join us next time as our heroes leave the Spinward Marches for the Vargar Extents and fight murderous cultists as they search for Seven's secret stronghold in Chapter 9, The Dark Gate.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews, or how-tos, or even more of this series on Secrets of the Ancients? Just hit that subscribe button. Be sure you check out Seth's new merchandise shop for his new Pixie shit, part of his Tour of the Spinward Marches series that he's doing for this campaign. Next time, travelers, you have a great day. I understand that you gotta cut a lot of stuff out of this for runtime and all that, but one story that I am amazed that you did not share in this episode is what happened with Dr. Brevis. One of her oldest and dearest friends over the past 50 years was Professor Nchinka from Chapter 1, and she was murdered by Gaius Labre. And then, Baven Shah, he showed up in Chapter 3 and blew up and murdered all of her friends and co-workers and grad students. So Dr. Brevis, she wanted those jerks dead. So, in that period of time between when Orissa said that she was going to spring us, and when that thing showed up and we got inside of it and we got out of that prison, that's when Dr. Brevis made a move. And because Peachy's character was stuck over in solitary confinement, you asked his player, hey, do you want to play Hilda? Do you want to play Dr. Brevis? That way we can keep playing the game with us. And he, of course, said that he wanted to play Peachy's mama. So, In that span of time, she found all this stuff that she could use her chemistry skills and make some poison with. And then she executed a flawless plan of getting that poison onto those jerks' food for lunch one day. And it was hours before anybody figured out that those two guys were dead in their bunks. And then Lily pinned the whole thing on that Zodani spy, and some of the guards and other inmates, they raided there. They started giving her a beat down because they thought she did it. And it took a little bit for some other guards to pull them off. By the time anybody figured out what was going on, Dr. Brevis was hell and gone out of there. I mean, straight up gangster right there, right? She committed 2 murders, a frame job, and escaped the prison all in the same freaking day. Serious old lady badass right there. You know, I say you go ahead and keep that for a profile picture for the rest of the series now.